welcome to the inaugural episode of the NFL Fantasy Flex podcast. I'm your guy, Big Mike here, and today we are doing our Week 10 recap, takeaways, and learnings. So in today's session, I'm just going to walk through each game and point out my highlights, things that stood out to me, my assessment of things, and of course, what players you should be looking at based on what we learned in Week 10. So let's get it started here. Buffalo versus New York. And so, sorry Jets fans, but Mike White is not the answer. As much as I would have loved to see him be the answer, it's just not going to happen. Sorry, he doesn't deserve to be the first overall pick as he claimed. Those 4 interceptions speak louder than words. And I don't really know why the Jets are all that bad. On paper, they certainly aren't the least talented team in the league. They have a pretty good offensive line, pretty good rookie running back. I guess their defense, they got a new defensive coach. Defense lacks some talent, but I would think they'd be able to grind out at least another win here in this season. One bright spot on the Jets offense, though, was their rookie receiver, Elijah Moore. I think folks, especially in PPR formats, especially in dynasty formats, should really give this guy some serious consideration. He's that Jamison Crowder type of receiver in the slot that could catch some passes over the middle, has some breakaway speed and elite quickness. He's just, in a poor situation on the Jets, and also any rookie receiver figuring out the NFL game takes some time. So one bright spot for the Jets there. But let's talk about Buffalo a little bit. Their defense, playing the Jets, their defense is going to look, any defense is going to look good. But I think their defense is still elite. Where I see some concerns, though, is on their offensive line. I see this is how they got beat by Jacksonville, right? Is Josh Allen was just under constant pressure. And we saw a bit of that as well here. He obviously was able to thrive and find Stephon Diggs for monster gains in this game. But if there is one area of concern, it is protecting their star quarterback. But again, he uses rollouts and his mobility towards his advantage, and I think he can mask a lot of what they're lacking on that offensive front. Another player I want to call out is my man Dawson Knox. It was his first game back after a hand injury. Wasn't utilized all that much, but I think that's a testament of him not being needed, right? When your star player, your star receiver, Stephon Diggs, is getting anything he wants all day, you're going to feed that beast. And so as we see Buffalo face some tougher and tougher matchups coming up, I think Knox is going to be Josh Allen's security blanket once again. So if somebody dropped him due to injury and bye weeks and whatnot, take a look at Knox as well. I'm a big Dawson Knox believer. All right, the next game I want to talk about was the Bucs versus the Washington football team. This game was a total upset. We saw Tom Brady upset during and after the game. That offense was just not clicking. Maybe it has to do with Antonio Brown being out, Rob Gronkowski being out. Chris Godwin was really out there as a decoy. You could tell he was noticeably hindered by his injury. And so it was really just Brady and Mike Evans in the passing game. And once that game script flipped for them and it was no longer a ground and pound type of game script, which is what I predicted and I think most people predicted, they just weren't able to keep up with Washington, as crazy as this sounds. So what everyone was expecting was, all right, Tampa will get a lead and then just feed Fournette and keep it on the ground and play solid defense. But again, once that game script got flipped, they were forced to air it out and just didn't have the talent in the receiving core to make it happen. Now we look at Washington. Heineke, never going to say he's the real deal. I think he's just limited in terms of talent, but he's a hardworking dude. He could make some things happen on the ground. And we'll see. I mean, maybe in a year or two, if they stick with him, he can develop. I just don't see them sticking with him long enough for that to happen. I think the Washington running back situation is interesting. I have some stock in Gibson and McKissick, and I'm actively trying to move them because this is a quagmire. I mean, you're never going to know which one to start. It's so game script dependent, right? A game like this, if I had to throw McKissick in there, he would have been the better start. We all would have assumed that Washington would have been playing from behind, having that negative game script, throwing the ball, and J.D. McKissick would have been the benefactor. But what did we see? Washington got a lead and wanted to grind out a win, and so they fed Gibson on the ground. And so it was his turn. So good luck predicting which one of these guys' turn it is to go off. I'd rather remove myself from this situation entirely. It's a pretty ugly two-headed beast. So again, your guess is as good as mine on who to start on a week-to-week basis, but I think this is an opportunity to sell Gibson high and try to get some value back. The other player worth mentioning on Washington is Terry McLaurin. People were drafting him second and third round, and I would be bold enough to say he's a bust this year. I mean, he had, 2 or 3 games over 20 points, back-to-back weeks of under 10-point games. I just think that's a really expensive draft pick for not much production. I mean, some people drafted him to be their wide receiver 1, and I feel bad for those people. I don't know. I don't think it's Heineke's fault. Maybe it's just the way their offense is being run, but McLaurin is a boomer bust. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Washington try to bring in more talent at receiver in the offseason going into next year. And so even from a future prospect perspective, I don't know if Terry McLaurin is actually going to be the answer moving forward in terms of being an elite wide receiver 1 in fantasy. All right, next game, Atlanta and Dallas. I called, and many others called, the Dak bounce back. This was a prime spot for him, and that's exactly what happened. That Dallas offense and defense really clicked. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. But first, man, Atlanta. I'll be the first to own up to recommending starting Matt Ryan last week, but I don't think anyone foresaw a performance quite so horrible. And they ended up pulling him at the end of the game, which was kind of shocking. And, to me, I even when you're getting blown out, I love to see a quarterback, especially a gritty veteran, take it out there and score me some garbage time points. I saw Matt Stafford do that 2 weeks ago and, salvaged a day more or less. Still didn't cost it. Totally cost me my week, and Matt Ryan wasn't even able to do that. So I am totally off any Matt Ryan stock. Not that I was ever a big fan of him to begin with, and I think Atlanta really needs to, their record I don't think indicates quite how bad they are, but I think they need a complete overhaul. They need a new quarterback. Who knows what's going on with Calvin Ridley? I don't want to be too critical there nowadays with the mental health agenda that's going on, but they need a receiver that's going to be on the field. They need an offensive line and they need a defense. So if there's any position that I'm leaving out, I don't think there is one. Maybe kicker, maybe the Younghoe Koo is maybe one guy they keep, but I think they need a complete overhaul, and starting with that quarterback position. And maybe Matt Ryan has 1 year left to be that bridge guy, but they need to bring in some fresh talent there at quarterback to pair with their new exciting receiver Pitts, right? So anyway, back to Dallas. I think Dak did what we thought. We saw Michael Gallup return off of IR, getting some targets early. Told you all to keep an eye on him on the waiver wire. Getting a piece of this high-powered Dallas offense now could pay off later. We saw really everything working on all cylinders. We saw Zeke and Pollard getting fed, finding the end zone. We saw CeeDee Lamb going off again. I guess the only player in this unit that really didn't go off last week was Dalton Schultz. He was barely missed in the end zone. He could have had a touchdown to salvage his day. I'm not a huge Dalton Schultz fan. I'd rather have a guy like Dawson Knox, to be quite honest. But if you did invest some stock in Schultz, I wouldn't abandon ship yet. But I don't have faith for him to be a week-to-week starter. I think you're going to need to pair him with somebody else and play some matchups. All right, moving on to New Orleans and Tennessee. I think New Orleans should have won this game, personally. That New Orleans defense is very, very underrated. Trevor Siemian played great. I would actually look at him as a sneaky good streamer this week. And they've been able to close out and win and grind out games, and I'm surprised they didn't do it again here versus Tennessee. And then on the flip side, I've kind of been critical of Tennessee thus far this season, but there's games they won that I didn't think they deserved to win, and that maybe the other team lost as opposed to them winning. But that defense has gotten much better, and they just know how to grind out and win ugly games. Their offensive identity hasn't changed despite Derrick Henry's injury, and so we saw a guy like Deontay Foreman, who I love. I'm thrilled to see him back in the league and getting work. He was injured and banged up and bounced around for a while. So he fits their kind of one cut, north and south, bruiser type of running game, that power run game. And he's going to see volume, even splitting time with Adrian Peterson and Jeremy Nichols. Seems like he's going to see volume. It seems like he's going to be their goal line guy. And so, take a look at him on waivers. And the other guy I want to comment on was a guy who busted for Tennessee this week, A.J. Brown. I would think with Julio being out now, Brown is their star receiver. And for him to put up the performance he did is just pathetic. I think he got shaken up in the game at one point. But I kind of warn people against A.J. Brown as well, because this is a run-first team, right? If they get a lead, they're going to lean on their run game and defense, and they don't need to throw the ball to win. And so I think A.J. Brown may have peaked last year in terms of targets and volume and production, and people took him second round, expecting him to be their wide receiver one. And that's a very expensive wide receiver to take for a guy being on a team where the volume is just not there. So I wish you guys all the best, A.J. Brown owners, but he's going to be extremely boom or bust. He's a big play guy. He's going to try to make things happen after the catch. And if that stuff doesn't happen, well, you're going to see weeks like this, week 10. All right, Jacksonville and Indiana, or Indianapolis. This was one game that went exactly as predicted. We saw Indianapolis jump out to an early lead, mainly through their running game, which is amazing, offensive line. And Jonathan Taylor is just an elite talent. I'm one of the few analysts who had Jonathan Taylor top 10 this year. There was concerns about folks like Hines and Marlon Mack eating into his workload, but one thing I know is talent always wins. And so even if you have some annoying pests in that backfield, right, results are what ultimately are going to matter, and JT has given them the best results. And they have that elite offensive line, so that's their identity. And man, he's the best running back in the game right now with Derrick Henry being out. So really happy for you JT owners who drafted him maybe in the second round or are getting elite running back one numbers from. I mean, he could win you games he could win you fantasy games all by himself. But they got a lead and were able to grind this out. I must say. And so the other thing I want to talk, and you hear me talk about game script so much, right? I saw so many analysts predicting Carson Wentz to be this great streamer, right? And granted, he's playing against Jacksonville, not a great defense. well, actually, their defense is better than their offense. So you have a team in Jacksonville who's bad, right? But their defense is okay, and their offense is less than okay. So do you really think Carson Wentz is going to need to air it out to win? No. He might have to convert some third downs through the air. Maybe he throws a touchdown, which he didn't. But you can't expect him to have this monster fantasy week, even though he's playing a team that has a bad record. So again, game script matters. You want to see two elite offenses and two bad defenses go up against each other. That's what's going to make for a better streamer quarterback than a guy like Carson Wentz facing Jacksonville. So I'll get off my soapbox on that, but really think about how the game is going to play out when you're trying to pick your streamers. The other thing I want to call out on Jacksonville is Trevor Lawrence is improving. I see it. He's in a tough situation there. We know the coaching staff has kind of been rumored to be not the best out there, and I hope for his career that there's some stability in that situation so he can continue to improve. But got to give it to him. He's putting in work, and I'm starting to show on the field. All right, next game is Detroit and Pittsburgh. So I just got to start by shouting out my man Najee Harris. Again, I was one of the few fantasy analysts that had him in my top 10. I know he's behind an improving offensive line that started the year very poor, and maybe that's why some folks had him lower than I did, but I knew the volume was going to be there, and you could see that in his snap count, right? He is the clear-cut workhorse in a time and era in the NFL where workhorses are exceedingly rare. So for all those who drafted Najee maybe in the second and third round and are seeing running back one numbers out of him, congratulations, I'm thrilled. But when it comes to Pittsburgh, man, Mason Rudolph had no business being on the field. I don't even know if he's a viable backup QB2 for a team at this point. They were lucky to get, the 16 points that they were able to get with him. Also, it was a sloppy, wet, rainy game. So maybe he'd look better in good weather, but it is what it is. And I might be, for not being a Lions fan, I might be the one guy rooting for Detroit harder than anybody else. I think this team's got a great attitude, is mentally tough. I see them, we all seen them lose really close games and come back out and grind out week after week after week. I think there was really only 1 week where they got blown out. Every game is close, and they come out and play like angry and motivated, and really those goofy press conferences Dan Campbell had where he wanted to instill this tough, mentally tough culture. I think he's doing that, and it's starting to pay off. We saw them go from losing close games to now tying a game. So who knows? Maybe we'll see a win next. But I am rooting hard for Detroit. I think there's some underrated aspects to Detroit. I think their run defense is better than people give them credit for. And they have some key injuries on that defensive secondary, so maybe next year they improve there just by getting healthy. And then on the offensive side of the ball, they have an elite run game, and I think they tried to really flex that. They really tried to flex that this past week against Pittsburgh. And we saw guys like Johnson and Iwabukwe get touchdowns, and my man DeAndre Swift failed to meet the end zone, but man, he still had a great fantasy day. Same with Najee. I think if you have guys like Swift and Najee that are able to give you 15-plus points on weeks where they don't score touchdowns, man, that's money in the bank. That's gold. That's what you're looking for in fantasy players, guys that can give you production on the weeks they don't score touchdowns. And in guys like Najee and DeAndre Swift, that's what you're getting. And Swift, a lot of people were afraid of him for having this committee with Jamal Williams. I probably had him a bit underranked looking back, but not as bad as some other folks did. There's some folks that really faded him. And I think, again, it's a situation where talent's going to rise to the surface. And to me, DeAndre Swift is an elite talent. I mean, go look at his tangibles on like Player Profiler, for example, and his numbers, his tangibles are second to like Barry Sanders, and he is an elite talent. We saw him with some crazy hurdle, some crazy jukes week after week, and so players like that, even if they're in a committee, are going to ultimately get fed. And then Swift has kind of sneakingly become this PPR beast, where we see him utilized heavily in the passing game. Again, on a team like Detroit, where they're always playing from behind, right? He's getting you bonus points just from catches alone. So, really high on Swift. But I gotta say, Goff, man, he is bad. I hate to pile on this kid. It's kind of crazy where he took the Rams to a Super Bowl. He's been to playoffs. He's got this experience, and to see a kid like this just kind of fall apart, I don't know if it's a mental thing or what. But I don't wish this on anybody. And I don't want to harp on it too much. But I think next season the Lions are going to need some fresh blood at quarterback in order for them to even attempt to be close to a 500 ball club. All right. Next is Cleveland versus New England. So first, I just want to start off by saying the Patriots are red hot. Like, this team has gotten better and better, particularly that defense. And their young quarterback, Mac Jones, is settling in even more into their offensive system. And so, watch out. They're going to be in the hunt to win this division against Buffalo. If not, they're going to be a wild card team. And this is a team I would not want to face going into the playoffs. So we saw a real just beat down on Cleveland. And Cleveland is supposed to be same thing, this contender for their division, likely a wild card team. And it's not. They just got spanked. And so I think a few takeaways from Patriots. We have probably the guy who's going to be the leader in waiver wire additions this week, Ramondre Stevenson. Here's the guy I told you guys to stash early on. He was on my sleepers list super early in the season before drafts. And now we start to see what he can do when he's actually getting work and getting volume. So not the most ideal situation when he's sitting behind a guy like Damian Harris, who's a very similar style running back. But any week Harris is out, Ramondre is going to get fed. And it's funny, I actually liked Brandon Bolden in this game a bit more going into the week. I thought Bolden was actually, if you were in a pinch and needed a streamer, not going to be bad. But this game script got away from anybody. I thought this was going to be a back and forth game where the Patriots needed to throw, and Bolden would have gotten more production out of the passing game. But as we know, that didn't happen. Patriots got a huge lead and just were able to grind it out on the ground with Stevenson between the tackles. So really depending on game script, I think, in true Belichick fashion, good luck predicting what running back's going to go off if they're all healthy. A situation I typically stay away from. In terms of Cleveland, we'll see how bad this Baker Mayfield injury is. It looked like it was a hip or a leg injury. Without him, I think their offense is going to be hindered in a major way. And not that he's elite by any means, but he's a good game manager and converts third downs and provides them big plays and does enough to prevent teams from stacking the box against their elite run game. So I think Cleveland, hopefully Mayfield's not hurt too bad. They need Chubb and Hunt back like ASAP. Chubb should be back. He was just on COVID protocol. Hunt, who I think is the better, more complete back, needs to get back ASAP. And then another shout out to D'Ernest Johnson. I think this kid's legit. I love watching him run jump cut after jump cut and makes guys miss. I think he needs to let his contract run out and go sign with another team where he's going to get more volume. This kid really has a lot of potential. I really like D'Ernest Johnson. I don't know about in fantasy, but if he goes to another team and gets options, I would look and see where he's being drafted in fantasy. So maybe next year, a year or two, I don't know what his contract is like, but man, click you that favorite or that star, or put him on your watch list because he's got some talent. All right, next game, Minnesota and San Diego. To me, these are two underperforming teams. I think they're both better than their record suggests. I think they have some aspects of their games that are glaringly average, but others that are just waiting to break out. So we could start with San Diego. I think Herbert needs to get back to doing Herbert things, pushing the ball downfield, finding that connection with Mike Williams. Um, Eckler, I think, is a solid fantasy option. Obviously, um, I'm a bit of an Eckler hater. I'm of the camp that says he's not a full time workhorse, which they're not using him as a full time workhorse, which is actually working towards his benefit. They're using him more strategically, and he's able to stay on the field. And he's not giving you elite running back one numbers, but he's giving you elite running back two numbers on your fantasy squad. So if you drafted him second, third round in your fantasy draft, I think you're getting appropriate value. Um, and then the other guy I want to call out is Larry Roundtree. I really like this rookie. He runs super hard, and he was able to score his first NFL touchdown last week. And you saw how the team responded. Go take a look at that. Everybody was coming off the bench and congratulating this guy. And to me, that's a huge sign that this kid works his butt off and has earned the respect of his fellow teammates. So if you're in a keeper league, and stash Larry Roundtree, I could see him getting more and more work next year. And when it comes to Minnesota, a few things stand out. First is the Dalvin Cook situation. Um, Man, when it comes to Dalvin Cook, like, play at your own risk. And you better prepare, you better have him cuffed with Alexander Madison. That's just because of injuries and his injury history. But now we have this situation with his ex-girlfriend and all of these allegations that are coming out. My take on it is it's just an ugly breakup. These two people were toxic together. This is a harmful relationship that needs to end, and they're going back and forth, right, in this kind of ugly breakup. Are they going to break up? Are they not? I think we've all either been in or know people and know friends that have been in relationships like this, where there's kind of like this love-hate thing going on. And I think, Dalvin Cook just needs to realize he's got too much to lose to be involved in this, right? Man, the what they did in the bedroom might have been amazing, but Dalvin, you got to think with the big head for once and realize you got too much to lose, and you can't put that at risk for a piece of what. So Dalvin, get your ish together. I'm glad you were able to produce on the football field for your fantasy followers and fantasy fans, but you can't be risking and making us sweat over this situation when we're already sweating after each carry, after each time you're tackled that you might not get up. And so the other aspect of the Vikings, I saw their defense improve. I think I saw Anthony Barr with a freakishly amazing interception this week. Go look up that highlight. And I think again, this team is better than their record suggests, and so if they could grind out a few more wins and just play to their strengths, this could be a wild card team that at least makes the playoffs. All right, Carolina and Arizona. Not many takeaways from this game. I mean, Arizona was clearly injured. Their two best players, in Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins, out on offense. And Carolina just, they have an elite defense. I've been calling out this defense since the very beginning of the year. I actually drafted this defense. Not that I own them anymore, but you guys know my strategy is draft a defense for week one. Use your last pick of the draft. Draft a defense for week one. Carolina was playing, I believe, the Jets week one. And I was like, all right, great defense with a lot of young talent, right? Playing a not great team week one. And it paid off. And now they actually are a fantasy viable defense. But we know they have a lot of young talent. They spent all this draft capital investing in this defense, have a defensive-minded coach, and so it's no surprise to me that they're elite. We just have to wait for the rest of the NFL followers to catch up. And I think you guys know I'm a Cam Newton hater. I've been a Cam Newton hater. This guy posts workout video after workout video, but I never see him throwing a damn football, and it shows. So with that said, I think he is in the best situation, the one where if he is going to succeed, this is the one situation where it might actually happen. He's got the culture and the fan base behind him in Carolina. He's got that history there. It seems like he already won the locker room over. I mean, I think anything in terms of leadership is a step up from Darnold. So he's got the players' respect. I think, he's got the defense. He's got the run game with McCaffrey and Hubbard. It's really going to come down to, can he make the few throws he needs to make to have this team win games? And can they design this offense around what he's limited in doing? Right? We know he's not an elite thrower of the football. He can't make certain outside throws. He can't make touch passes. So can you design an offense that leverages his mobility, leverages his really ability to throw some lasers and some short dinks and dunks type of passes, a screen game? And I think they have that. I think they have the skill guys around him to effectively make an offense that can thrive despite his limitations as a quarterback. So good on you, Cam. Good on you, Panthers. I wish you guys the best of luck. Cam, just cut down on the hats and the fashion and the silly workout videos, and you'll be all right. The other note from Arizona is, man, James Conner seems like the workhorse there. I liked him over Edmonds. I had him and Edmonds closer than most. And so it's no surprise that with Edmonds going down, that Connor's getting workhorse treatment and finding the end zone. So if you're able to snag Connor, good on you. All right. Next game, Philly and Denver. Man, these are two weird, like, boom or bust teams. I can't really put my finger on when they're going to boom and when they're going to bust. I think Denver, on paper, I mean, from the stat sheet, they have this elite defense, right? They give up the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks and running backs and tight ends or whatever, right? But it doesn't translate on the field. And we saw, right, I'll apologize. I told you guys to sit all your Eagles last week, and we still saw them maybe not blow up. I think besides Devontae Smith, Hurts didn't blow up, Goddard didn't blow up, but they had serviceable fantasy days. They weren't worth benching, especially in a weird week where fantasy quarterbacks didn't do all that great. So your guess is as good as mine when it comes to predicting when these teams are going to actually live up to their potential. Is Denver defense legit? Is Denver offense able to score 30 points? Is Philly defense legit? Can Hurts manage a game? Will Philly run the ball, right? All these questions are so week to week. And I think my big takeaway, at least from Philly, is their offensive approach is very specific on their opponent, right? When they were playing teams like Detroit again, on the stat sheet, give up a lot of yards to the running backs, right? What did they do? They lined up in big personnel and put Jordan Howard in there and fed Jordan Howard and were able to play some solid defense behind it. And then against a team like Denver, right, they had to take another offensive approach. You can't just line up and run the ball against Denver. So they had to get Jalen Hurts out there doing some things and had their big playmaker Devontae Smith going out and making plays. So I would say again, I don't have stock in any guys on any of these teams. Well, I take that back. I have Noah Fant, who I could touch on a little bit, but Philly, I wouldn't want any part of because you don't know what you're going to get week to week. Same with Denver. Noah Fant's been somewhat consistent in terms of tight ends. I'm losing my affinity for him because we see his tight end fell apart. Albert O actually outscored him last week, and so We're lucky that they have a very conservative pass game where Bridgewater's going to lean on these guys. But Fant's becoming more and more touchdown dependent. And so, again, if you could hit that waiver wire and get guys like Dan Arnold or Tyler Conklin to make your playoff push, I recommend at least having some options at tight end, because guys that you might have drafted like Fant just aren't as reliable anymore. All right, Seattle and Green Bay. This was kind of a weird game. I think Seattle needs to rebuild. They need a new coach, new defensive coordinator. I think they need to start from scratch on defense. And I honestly think this is the last year we'll see Russell Wilson with this organization. We heard him voicing some displeasure during the offseason. I feel like he gave them a let's see how it goes. I'll give you one more chance, and it's not going well. This dude gets no protection. His offensive line is still a huge concern. Their defense sucks, and I think it's largely because of their defensive coordinator. I mean, there's plenty of statistics you could go out and find and read about how this defensive coordinator is like disguises his coverage as the least amount of less than anybody else. Simple things like this that they're just not doing. Like, at least disguise your coverages. Don't be so blatant in whether or not you're blitzing or playing man or zone. Whether or not your scheme is right or wrong is one thing, but at least you can do is get things right pre-snap. So, in the meantime, I think, Seattle, they're going to be forced to air it out to win games. And so there's going to be weeks where Wilson puts up decent points, and same with Lockett and Metcalf. And I think the one good thing for Lockett owners is Wilson being back. He was hurt the most by Wilson being out. And we at least saw him targeted last game. He didn't have a huge game, but I think that's going to change, and I think you'll start to see that Russ to Lockett connection get a bit more on track here the rest of the year. Moving on to the Packers. It's funny, I actually advised a friend of mine to sit Aaron Rodgers for Derek Carr this week. I thought Aaron Rodgers was going to come out rusty based on him being really not practicing at all, being away from the team for over a week. And we saw what happened week 1 with Aaron Rodgers, where he wasn't maybe the most engaged participant throughout training camp leading up to the season. What did they do? Right? They busted. And so I thought we might see a flavor of that this week. He did enough to win the game, obviously, but I knew it wasn't going to be a huge fantasy day. So not that Carr had an amazing day, but he still, it was still a better stream and spot start than what your go-to starter and Rodgers got you this week. We saw Aaron Jones go down with a knee sprain. So look at A.J. Dillon. He is owned in, I think, about 70% of leagues, so he might not be available for you. But if he is, scoop him up. He'll be an instant starter for you while Aaron Jones is out. The other thing worth mentioning is that this Packers defense is quietly legit. Maybe not a good fantasy defense, but we could see that they're going to be able to hold opponents to few points and really help the Packers win games. All right, moving on to the Sunday night game, Kansas City, Oakland. I mean, this is like the main theme of the podcast here. I guess you could see it on my thumbnail. Like, all this talk about, is Mahomes broken? No, he's not broken. He's back. This offense is back. Travis Kelce is back. Is part of it them playing a familiar foe in Oakland, a division rival? Maybe they're very familiar with this team and what they do. But I didn't really doubt that it was completely over in Kansas City and that Mahomes was just broken, right? I saw analysts talk about how, the RPO broke him. And yeah, granted, we saw some bad decision making in Mahomes. I saw some film where he was trying to roll out when he could have just, slid up in the pocket and made a throw. We saw him rushing or mismanaging his reads. But, he's got two elite coaches and his offensive coordinator and head coach to lean on here. And it was just a matter of time before they fell back in the groove. I don't know if there's something wrong with Travis Kelce in terms of an injury that he's been playing through, but it was good to see him come back and return to form as well. And I'll go out on a limb and say Darrell Williams is better right now than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. CEH might have youth on his side, might have more potential, but Darrell Williams has stepped in and been actually a better starter than CEH was. So if you were able to pick up D-Will on waivers, good on you. We see him really being used as a workhorse in the run game and pass game. We saw some Derek Gore and Jerick McKinnon sprinkled in here, but this is Darrell Williams' backfield at this point. And the big thing is seeing him being used in this passing game. Again, we know the Chiefs are going to pass a ton, so for a running back to have success on this team, he's going to have to be involved in this pass game. And we saw D-Will come out with a huge catch, and so I think that means they're gonna go to him again, right? So again, just a heads up, when we see CEH come back from injury, which now they're not going to rush him back, right? They're going to take their sweet time because D-Will is playing so well. But I could also see this being an ugly committee when he returns, where CEH is getting some early down work. Darrell Williams maybe goes back to being more of a passing down specialist. So, temper your expectations when CEH gets back. And then again, like I mentioned, Derek Carr, I recommended a friend stream him this week. He's a viable spot starter. If your quarterback's out on a bye week, depending on matchups, Carr could be a good guy for you. So again, put him on your watch list. I don't know if he deserves to be rostered week to week. I don't keep backup quarterbacks, so for me, I have my starter, and to me, it's a deep enough position where I could stream if I need to. And so I like him. He's included in my potential streaming options when it comes to quarterbacks. And then there's last night's game, Rams and Niners. This game, I think, went completely against what I foresaw. But this bye week can't come at a better time for LA. I don't know what's going on with Matthew Stafford. We saw 2 weeks in a row now with him making some really inaccurate throws, overthrowing guys, throwing balls behind guys. I know he was on the injury report 2 weeks ago with a back and was limited and didn't get a lot of practice reps in. This, leading up to week 10, I didn't see him pop up on the injury report. So I don't know if he's playing through something or if it's systemic in terms of what's going on in that offense and Robert Woods going out and then having to adjust rather quickly, bringing in guys that I can't even pronounce their names to fill that Robert Woods role. And then we saw Van Jefferson, who was very disappointing. I think a lot of folks expected him to step into that Woods role and really thrive and get more volume. And we saw drops from him. We saw mental mistakes from him. And so really disappointing kind of debut, if you will, for Van Jefferson in his increased role. Analysts, including myself, saw Van Jefferson as really being on the depth chart ahead of their new addition, OBJ. But if he keeps playing like he did last time, OBJ is going to be that wide receiver too. So we'll see what happens there. And when it comes to the Niners, man, all I got to say is Debo, man. Debo is the man. And I'm so happy I have him on my team. Was able to get him late in drafts. We heard all this offseason buzz around Ayuk and how Ayuk is going to be the man. But let me tell you, when you could get a wide receiver that does things after the catch, it's easy money, right? It's easy money. Even if they have an average quarterback like Garoppolo who can't push the ball down the field, well, he doesn't have to now. He could throw a 10-yard pass and Debo could turn it into a 40-yard touchdown. Some guys don't like to live and die by the big play, but I think in fantasy, if you have a couple guys that could go off at any given week, then you're good. They could still win you games, right? If one of them goes off and the other doesn't, you're still getting production. If they both go off, you just won. So a guy like Debo, who is a big play guy, I think, man, I don't know why we all slept on him. I know he was injured last year, but he fits this offensive system perfectly. and we're going to keep seeing him eat. Just pray with me to the football gods that he stays healthy. We saw George Kittle come back in true Kittle form, throwing monster blocks in the run game, also finding the end zone. Glad to see him back and healthy. And then when it comes to this Niners running back situation, it seems like Elijah Mitchell has this tied up, right? We've heard, including myself, we many other analysts criticize this San Francisco approach to running the ball, this running back carousel where we never knew who was going to get the volume. Well, I think that's settled, man. I mean, we have Jeff Wilson, J. Michael Hasty, Trey Sermon. These guys are healthy and available, and they're still feeding Mitchell the bulk of the work. So for those of you guys who were able to spring and get Mitchell on the waiver wire earlier in this year, I think that investment's really paying off. I'm kind of kicking myself for not drafting this guy late and recommending you all draft him late. I loved his intangibles or his tangibles, his measurables. Again, look him up on Player Profile. Look at his college tape. I really did like this kid. I thought he fit this system perfect. But again, it was this stigma of, is he going to get the volume in this running back carousel? And I should have just had more faith in my intuition that, again, talent rises to the top, and he is very talented. All right, so there we have our main takeaways from Week 10. Going into Week 11, I just want to mention a few waiver wire additions for you guys. I have my official graphic. Put that out on Instagram today. Give me a follow there at NFL.flex or on Facebook, facebook.com/NFL.flex. And you guys can see my official list and read my official blurb about waiver wire ads. But just want to mention a few here. I mentioned before Ramondre Stevenson. I think let people bid on him. I mean, unless you're in a keeper league and really love him for the future, let other people blow their wad on him, because Damian Harris is going to be back next week. He was just out with a concussion. So he's going to be back. He's going to cut into Stevenson's workload. I don't think he's worth blowing your load on. I like a guy like Deontay Foreman better. We saw him get some real legitimate volume in Tennessee. He fits their system well. It's a run-first team. I think even splitting time with Adrian Peterson and Jeremy Nichols, Foreman is going to eat. So, again, don't spend too much on him, but let all the Seagulls go after Ramondre, and you could sneak around and pick up Deontay Foreman for better value. If A.J. Dillon's on your waiver wire, again, like I mentioned, he's taken in a lot of leagues, but he's worth blowing your load on, I think, even over the next 2 weeks if you really need a running back. There's some wide receivers available. Rashad Bateman, I've had him on my waiver ads list for the past few weeks, and he's been putting up consistent numbers. PPR, Dynasty, or Keeper, definitely even increases the case for Bateman. Michael Gallup, we saw him get some targets. Again, he's available in leagues coming off of IR. Elijah Moore, available in leagues. He's starting to see volume and settle in. Another wide receiver, Marcus Johnson. He's going to be the replacement in Tennessee for Julio Jones. We're starting to see him put up some double-digit fantasy points consistently. So he's kind of maybe worth a stash or a flyer. Let's see here. When it comes to tight ends, I mentioned Dan Arnold, Tyler Conklin. Those are probably the guys at the top of the tight end list. Dan Arnold's been getting a ton of targets, guys. And I really watched him play last week. I thought he was this more slow blocking tight end type who Jacksonville's trying to force into a receiver role. But no, he made some athletic plays and ran some nice routes last week, and they're feeding him targets. So really give him a look. I really recommend adding him. And then Tyler Conklin, he's getting the red zone targets. He's got some easy matchups over the next 2 games before his schedule starts to get tougher. So you might be able to scoop him up for free or for $1 on your waiver auction and get some easy money at the tight end position. In terms of quarterbacks, I mentioned Cam Newton. I think he's maybe a bit more of a longer-term play. If you really believe in him, he might be able to be a 20-point scorer for you guys. Mac Jones going into this week, maybe a bit more of a streamer. He's got a friendly matchup, and we start to see that offense click. And Justin Fields, I think it might be a good streamer this week. They're playing Baltimore. That defense has had some problems. That offense has been able to put up points, so it might put Fields in a situation where he's got to air it out a bit. So might be worth a look if your quarterback's on a bye or you're in a pinch and need a spot starter. So yeah, guys, there you have it. Hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. This is my first one. I'm still figuring out format here. So it looks like what I'm going to be doing is this weekly recap and waiver overview on Tuesdays. And then on Fridays, I'm going to do a Thursday night recap and then a preview for Sunday games, Sunday and Monday. So that's where we'll go over all of the rankings. Rankings usually get released on Instagram and Facebook on Wednesdays. And we'll also be going over the starts and sits list on Friday. So I think what I'm thinking about is this 2 podcasts per week format, and we'll adjust and see how it goes. But appreciate any feedback you guys have. Just be respectful and constructive as always. Give me a like and follow and subscribe. And hopefully you guys stick around, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.